Join the coven. My father was arrested this morning. A story written by WeirdBryceGuy. When the news of his arrest arrived, I was the least surprised. My mother outright denied the statement, simply refused even the suggestion that my father could commit such a heinous crime as the one detailed by the reporting officer. My brother, 2 years younger and more inclined to my way of thinking, regarded the news as something to have been expected. My very young, vacant-minded sister failed to grasp the severity of the crimes, and simply took the announcement as something generally bad, the circumstances from which my father could assuredly free himself, as his made-up heroes had done during their father-daughter story time. He was being held without bail at the jailhouse about a 20-minute drive from our home, and at the demand of our mother, we all loaded into the family SUV and drove to meet our interned dad. He sat alone in a spacious cell, presumably used to house multiple criminals in one room. Though our town wasn't known for criminality, or anything really, and looked very upset. His dark blue jeans had various cuts in the fabric, as if torn by fingernails, something my mother pretended not to notice. His black sweater had at some point been splattered by something, and since I didn't remember him leaving the home in the morning with any stains, I assumed they were obtained during his alleged criminal act. His skin, which had been almost orange from the unyielding summer sun, was now unbelievably pale, as if he had been dipped in white paint and left to dry somewhere cold and lightless. Black hair previously combed back now sat in a downward felled mess, covering his forehead and his right eye. He didn't seem to mind the obstruction of vision. The officer who had led us to his cell said we had 10 minutes to speak with our father, and that due to the nature of my father's crime, he would have to remain in the corridor to supervise. We don't have a family lawyer. We've never needed one, and the suggestion of an attorney's presence was either unheard or ignored by my distraught mother. My sister, finally realizing the realness of the situation, ran to my father and hugged him. He didn't seem to notice her embrace nor our gathering in the room. He just stared at the floor, eyes set deep in his face, encircled by darkness born of tiredness or fright, while his mouth hung open and breathless. That's what unnerved me most. In the large, quiet room where, in any other city, several prisoners would be held, but in this one only our father resided. You could hear even the smallest sound. I heard my mother's unstable, ragged breathing, my brother's deep, self-calming respiration, and my sister's heavy gulps of air between her sobs. My own breathing was as steady as I could keep it, but no exhalations could be heard from my father. He just sat there as motionless as a cadaver, staring into oblivion, or gazing upon some remembered horror. When it became obvious that my father would not respond to our questions, of which there were many, even from myself and my brother, we left him alone and returned to the officer, who escorted us upstairs and into the lobby of the station. In another city, the building would have seemed underfunded, the officers ill-equipped to handle even a slow day's worth of crime. But in our town, the police openly expressed themselves to be bored out of their minds. Some even jokingly wished for an uptick in crime. But I highly doubt the charges laid against my father were what those sentinels of peace had in mind. They laid out the full details, and due to my father's lack of cooperation, hadn't felt the need to spare us the grislier aspects. They were furious with him, absolutely disgusted by what had transpired, and I realized that the suggestion of having a lawyer was merely an admonishment of formality. They wanted my father locked up, or perhaps even dead. When all had been said, and my mother had been given time to process what she had been told, we drove home in silence. During the ride, my sister stared out of the window and pointed at random objects, mouthing imperceptible things to herself. Her child's mind wouldn't be able to fathom what she had overheard during our briefing at the station. My brother stared down at his hands, which rested, palms down on his thighs. His face hard, unmoving. He was old enough to comprehend the things suggested, implied, and fully revealed. I could not see my mother's face, but I'm sure it was of a similar visage to my brother's, though probably masked to some degree by what she thought was a comforting, everything will be all right smile. My face was blank. I didn't need to come in terms with anything, and I had no difficulty in believing that my father could commit the atrocities of which he has been accused. I was aware of my father's predilection for violence. 6 days ago, a girl had gone missing. Her name was Kelly, and she was 13 years old. We were the same age. The local news reported that she had wandered off from her short walk to school with friends after something in the woods caught her attention. The 2 girls with whom she had been walking did not follow her, even called out to her to return to the sidewalk. But she ignored them. They ran to school and told the staff, who ran into the woods, and when they could not find her, called the police, who dispatched several officers to assist in the search. After an hour with no success, the town was alerted to the situation, and a full search party convened and dispersed throughout the woods and outlying neighborhoods. Today, after yet another unsuccessful morning search, a man walked into the police station holding a large bag. The man knelt in the lobby of the station, cradling the bag, his eyes fixated on nothing in particular, but aimed at the general direction of the officers. They approached the man, asked what he held, and when he did not respond, they opened it. Their reactions were what you'd expect them to be. After immediate shock wore off, they issued somber pats on the back of my father, who still had not spoken. They initially thought that in some gravely fortuitous lone man search, he had recovered the body of the missing girl. It was only when an officer noticed my father's hands and torn jeans that the atmosphere of the room dramatically shifted. Guns were raised and leveled at my father. Orders were barked out loud and into radios, and the gloom befallen room was thrown into chaos. My father had a tale reconstructed to the best accuracy possible, giving the evidence. Abducted the girl during her sojourn into the woods, bisected her at the hips, hidden the lower half, and returned the upper portion to the station. The lower half, which was found in the rarely used freezer we kept in our basement, had been preserved for a hideous purpose. Apparently, the girl had been slain on her last day of abduction, and my father had spent the previous few days behaving as if he had not been holding her captive somewhere. Where? We never found out. Why he kept her for so long before committing his secondary crime, we don't know. Some people believe the whole thing was some prolonged episode of insanity, making the largely uneducated assumption that years of heavy drinking had warped his mind, while others think it was the first of what would have been many murderous indulgences, born of some genetic predisposition for savagery. My brother took offense at that, despite not having any knowledge to disprove the assertion. He was only 11, and the seed of evil could very well be within him. I think that upset him more than the actual murder. The chance that he could one day carry out a similar act of diabolicism. My birthday's in 2 days. Remember how I said I could very well believe my father had done such terrible things? Last year on my birthday, my father was late to my birthday party. He and my mom argued, and in my desire to have a birthday party not ruined by fighting, I tried to break up the argument. My obviously drunk father pushed me, and I fell down our stairs, fracturing my spine. I was rendered permanently handicapped. My mother, hoping to preserve the family unit, reported the incident as an accident, that I had fallen while excitedly running up the stairs to retrieve a present. I didn't deny the story, only because I wanted to believe it was just an accident, that he hadn't truly meant to push me with such force. Whether my father's recent actions were born of immense guilt or the sick joke of a twisted mind, I can't say because I don't know. He won't speak to anyone, and from what I've heard during my mother's phone calls with authorities, he won't be allowed back to civilization for quite some time, if ever. We plan on moving soon. I don't know if it'll be another small town, but I don't think it'll matter anymore. Even the smallest, most remote place can have crimes as awful as those in any big city. What keeps me up at night, what sends a chill through my inoperative spine, is the note that was attached to one of the poor girl's legs. It read, "Melissa, I'm sorry for what happened last year. Please forgive me. I got you some new legs, just your size. I know they're not exactly the same. Hers is a little bit less toned, but it was the best I could do. I mean, she just stumbled into the woods while I was on my walk. I didn't even call out to her or anything. I hadn't thought of what to get you for your birthday that could make up for what I did last year. And those legs? Those legs! I just knew they'd be perfect for you. Please, Melissa, understand? From Dad."